Some people even talk about 5G plus or even thinking about 6G. Nevertheless, bottom line is that the same story applies. No network is perfect. And whether you're talking about public networks or private networks, you have some issues. So LIFO was founded upon that promise, which is our mission is to bring some software technology to the device, to the smartphone, in order to maximize connectivity by taking advantage of all existing mobile networks. That way, we mitigate the downsides or the negative effects of traditional roaming, which is great for tourists crossing the border, but which is not suitable for the kind of application we're talking about. We're really focusing on enabling this switch between one network to another to occur super fast, automatically, without user intervention, and with one single objective in mind, which is quality of user experience. And by that I mean there's a number of applications that come on top of the smartphone, of course, whether it's push-to-talk or SIP applications or what have you. We want to make sure that those applications are not affected too much, let's say, by moving from one network to another. So that's the business we're in. And when I say moving from one network to another, I'm referring to any type of network. So that can be moving from one public network to another public network, and that's being embraced nowadays by many governments for public safety. But it's also about moving from a private network to a public one and vice versa. And here, since we're here to talk about private networks, our goal is to address a couple challenges that have been identified by our customers. The first challenge is, as mentioned in the beginning, it's seamless switching from one environment to another. Some people have experienced this with Wi-Fi. You might be connected to Wi-Fi, then you move out of your house, and then it takes some time to switch to cellular. Same thing with roaming. If you move across a border, it takes a while to move from one network to another. So we focus on that to eliminate all of the negative effects of roaming, traditional roaming. And we make sure that if you have a private network, as soon as your private network is in sight from your terminal, we connect you to it. As soon as you exit your private network and connectivity is not at a suitable level on your private network, we make sure you connect automatically to a public network. And all this is done automatically without user intervention. So it really creates a superior user experience, especially because we make sure that the switch occurs so fast that the applications on the top are not affected significantly. So that's really number one, and that's all data-driven. The other challenge that we hear more and more about has to do with telephony. It sounds obvious, but we all rely on our smartphone to make voice calls, send text messages, receive text messages, and people know our phone number. We know their phone number. It's in our phone books. And people are starting to ask, okay, but if I have a private network and I have no decent coverage from my public operator, how are people going to reach me on my mobile phone? I'd like to be able to be reachable or to make calls or send text messages like before. So we tackle that aspect as well, so that with some of our capabilities, we can enable the continuous use of the mobile number, the public number, when you're connected to your private network, even if there's no coverage from your public operator. And that really makes operations seamless for the user. Now, in terms of use cases, I would say that we are rather, let's say, agnostic, and we address pretty much any vertical that would have a need for superior mobile connectivity, especially in mobility. By that I mean, if you take, for example, a business that has multiple campuses or multiple industrial sites, they might have a private network on each of those sites, but nothing in between. So this is an area where we come into play. And to give some practical examples, because I don't have slideware here, but I have real examples that we have tackled over time. First, in the healthcare sector, we've worked with our partner Alsatis from Toulouse on some 5G SA deployment on a hospital, where inside the hospital, everything revolves around that private 5G network, and they're enjoying superior connectivity. They are using SIP applications such as Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, Rainbow, and it delivers superior user experience when it comes to communications. Now, when they exit the 5G SA network, they're able to switch automatically to any of the public operators out there. And this is done, again, in a seamless fashion, and you can be in a call, even a video call during your SIP application, you will barely notice it. So that's really key in terms of impact. Another example in the airport/transportation space, we've done some work with Hub One on the Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. They have a large 4G private network, and this is a good illustration of the campus scenario I was mentioning. There's a 4G private network on the Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. They also have a private network on the Orly Airport, which is a few miles away. In between, there's no private network, of course. And here again, we were able to demonstrate how easily and quickly the phone can switch from one to another without user intervention and noticeable impact on user experience. Yeah. And I will end with one last example in the governance space. I cannot name the company for obvious reasons, but we've worked on a tactical bubble solution where, again, the tactical bubble is a private 4G in that case with dedicated coverage. And we demonstrated the seamless switch between the tactical bubble and the surrounding public networks for this particular government customer. So in the end, and I want to reiterate what Wendy said, standards are really important. And I want to say that everything we do is completely 3GPP compliant. There's nothing exotic in what we do. It works on smartphones out of the box with our software on it, of course. And it's ready for shipping, has been in use for several years now by thousands of happy users in the public safety space and B2B space.
Thank you very much, Bob. We're covering a lot of ground here, and you can just see kind of how flexible the private network space is and the number of options that are available. Our final speaker is Jeff from AtoCore. We have a few slides up here. So Jeff, very briefly introduce yourself, your company, and then we'll move into the slides and then see at the end if we have any questions.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. In fact, Peter, if you could put the first slide up, there's an introduction in that. So, yeah, my name's Jeff Land. I've worked for AtoCore now for just over 3 years. You can find me on LinkedIn there. I have 40+ years of a career working in all sorts of areas of the telecommunications sector. A little bit about AtoCore. If you could go back one slide. So we're a UK company, privately held. We're a 10-year-old company, so we're small, but we're not a startup. A distributed team, and the head office is in Cambridge. And it's one of those companies that is still majority owned by its founders. Everything we do is our own stuff. We own all of our own IPR, and there's no open source in our products. Next slide, please. And what we do, what our product is basically 4G and 5G and a converged 4G, 5G core software that is specifically focused on sectors of the private networking space. Our sweet spot actually is, as was just described, this bubble of coverage for military first responder type networks. So that's where we've come from in the last 10 years. Next slide, please. So the question set to me was to articulate a little bit about the latest developments in enterprise-specific solutions and are they fit for purpose. So I like to be a little bit provocative, and I've chosen two aspects of fully compliant 3GPP features that we have in the core that we've developed on the back of funded projects. and a little bit of feedback about what these could be in a private network and where they currently stand. So the first one is non-3GPP interworking. And the second one, which was mentioned earlier actually, is this 5G precise positioning. So let's go into a little bit of detail. Next slide, please. So this is a 5G core. This is what it looks like. These are all of the necessary functions for a Release 16 standalone 5G core. Happens to be an Atto core, 5G core, and actually there are a few Release 17 features in here as well. So on the first subject is the non-3GPP interworking, and it's circled there on the bottom right of the picture. The second aspect is, from the core perspective, is all around the other function, the LMF, which is the location management function of the core. So let's go into the non-3GPP first. Next slide, please. So what's this all about? So what this aspect gives you basically is either trusted or non-trusted, untrusted access to the 5G core and its services through an access layer that is non-3GPP. That's it in a nutshell. So the untrusted part would allow an enabled 5G user device to connect to the core via, for example, a public Wi-Fi network. So the UE continues to work where there's no 5G coverage, and it uses a fully standardized 3GPP N3IWF non-3GPP interworking function. The other aspect to this is the trusted non-3GPP access. So in an enterprise context, for example, this could be the private or corporate Wi-Fi network or a satellite network that you know and are expecting connections from. So the process is very similar, but the difference is that those streams connect to the TNGF, which is the trusted non-3GPP access. There's a third element to all of this as well, which is the ATSSS in the core, which could additionally allow for load balancing between 5G and Wi-Fi. So you've got a capacity enhancement opportunity here. Now, in terms of use cases, it's not hard to imagine a case where a large enterprise has invested heavily in its Wi-Fi network. So you're not looking to necessarily replace Wi-Fi, but overlay Wi-Fi with private 5G, augment it with private 5G, add an IoT layer, etc., etc. An obvious use case as well in a 5G context is voice over Wi-Fi, which is enabled, and it differs in 5G. In 4G voice over Wi-Fi, the device essentially connected directly to the IMS to handle the voice. In 5G, it's a little bit different, and all of the authentication needs to happen in the 5G core. Okay, next slide, please. So 5G precise positioning, we think should be a very, very interesting advancement and feature in private 5G deployments. It basically allows the private 5G to track the location of UEs within the network in real time and display those locations on a map or on a diagram of a logistics floor plan, for example. In addition to the UEs, the GNOBs and eNoBs can also be reported and displayed on the same map. And in 5G, this uses, again, fully 3GPP specified mechanisms that are used to generate the data that is then used to calculate the position of the device. So GPS is the obvious one, but obviously indoors, typically GPS is not available. So from the RAN, there are 4 potential inputs that can be taken into the location management function of the core. There's two in the uplink, so time domain of arrival or time difference of arrival, and angle of arrival of the radio signal from the device. Those uplink mechanisms only rely on the radio access layer, so the base stations basically. There are additionally downlink mechanisms as well, but these require interaction from the UE and are a lot more difficult, frankly. Next slide, please. So being able to identify the location of a device, use cases for that should be pretty obvious, but there are a few that we've been working on and have been involved in projects that have been looking at this. For me, the construction industry is a really, really interesting one. More and more, they're looking to digitize the construction workplace. So they build it, as is quoted here from our friends at BAM Construction, they build it digitally before they actually build it. Logistics and ports as well is an area we've been involved in where positioning has been a goal. And then smart city. And the kind of use cases here are around geofencing, particularly in the construction industry for site safety and security, location and identification of these connected and autonomous plant. So it could be heavy machinery, but equally robots. So there's interesting use case where
for us can we go a couple of extra minutes because clearly we had 5 speakers and I wanted to give you all enough time. Can we continue for a couple of minutes? Yeah.
I've nearly finished.
Okay,
So
no, that's
actually,
fine, yeah.
If you go to the,
okay, yeah.
if you go to the next slide,
okay.
Please. So the answer to the original question, are they really fit for purpose? Well, for these two features, actually, no. So today, for non-3GPP interworking, as interesting as it is, there's no support from any chip vendor that we've been able to find today, which it seems to be a political consideration, which is surprising and disappointing, and we can debate this. It was mentioned earlier about precise positioning that it's quite challenging for the RAN vendors. It puts some real emphasis on the quality of certain components in the RAN. And there have been some promises that, yes, this is on our roadmap, but to date, we haven't found a RAN vendor that supports this today. And that was it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I think we have enough time. There are a couple of questions that have come in. Can we go back? Okay. I think Philippe Poggianti had a question on the Estonian project, which I think is the Athonet, the 5G Timber project. Nicola, can you do you face any limitations on uplink throughput or capacity versus the use case requirements? And he also wants to know if the RU vendor, if you can name.
Yes. So right now we are achieving in uplink probably 200 to 300 megabits per second, which for the prototypes, it's a research project. So for the prototypes we are working on is sufficient. So in that sense, no, but I can see where the question is going for full deployment of digital twinning systems, depending on the use cases. And by the way, video streaming for cameras, higher throughputs may be needed, and it all boils down to the radio configuration and capacity. But I wouldn't say that the bottleneck of this kind of use case lies in the throughput, at least to our little experience here. And for the RU vendor, I have to say, Excelon, I should confirm, it should be Benetel, but I hope I'm not wrong. Anyway, the whole radio access network is provided by Excelon and integrated by them. So hopefully I'm not making mistakes.
Everything's fine there. So, Bob, there's a question to Bob. So maybe you can address, you can repeat the question and then address it, Bob.
Yep. So yeah, I did mention that we have an option with our offering that so that we can be reached on our public number while connected to a private network. And how does that work? So I'm not the technical expert, so I will just give the short answer. What we do is we use the standard, let's say, software brick, which is used for voice over Wi-Fi. And if you're familiar with voice over Wi-Fi, if you're sitting at home and you have no coverage from your public operator, you can still, pending approval from your operator, place a call while connected to your Wi-Fi router. That is feasible because there's a so-called ePDG connection that allows it. And basically, we exploit that feature, and rather than carry the voice call over Wi-Fi, what we do is we carry it over the secondary SIM or carrier, LTE bearer. So that's basically it, in short.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. I don't want to eat into the time of anybody else today, and maybe some of you have to quickly rush off to put the tea on or something more urgent. So I will simply thank Wendy, Stan, Nicolas, Bob, and Jeff for your contributions today. And we'll be back in 10 minutes with our next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good morning again. New panelist, 4 for this panel on the subject is yes, you are a lot since this morning private networks, spectrum on technology, but we see also other demands regarding what about the private and public networks, the link or not, what about multi-site, what about private on private, because we see a lot of other use cases with these needs. And it's why we have today to discuss about that. Sen van Loon from CityMesh, Florent Walter from Transatel, Xavier Delorme from TDF, and Thierry Berizot from Novamint. I will start by give the floor to Sen to present yourself. Thank you. To present yourself.
Good morning, everybody following in the audience. I'm Sen van Loon at CityMesh, responsible for everything in relationship to radio planning and optimization of our private network deployments based upon 4G and 5G technology. CityMesh is a Belgian-based company. CityMesh focuses on connectivity services across different domains and across different verticals. We have event-driven demands. We have enterprise environments with stringent connectivity needs. We build Wi-Fi networks, but since 5 years we also focus on private network deployments in various environments.
Thank you. Florian?
So thank you everyone. Florian Walter. I am part of Transatel. I am managing the private network activities that we have there. And just 2 words about Transatel. Transatel is what's named an MVNO, so Mobile Virtual Network Operator, which means we are providing services like all the different public operators, but we remain on the different radio access of all of our partners, which are hundreds of operators all around the world. And we have several types of activities, including services to standard enterprise looking for some connectivity, voice and data. We connect planes, airports, boats, cars manufacturer, and more recently, we started to deploy also some activities within the private network industry, where we also answer these questions of how to bridge the gap and providing access to our networks.
Thank you, Florian. Xavier, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So my name is Xavier Delorme. I'm working for TDF, and I'm in charge of business development for network activities, especially private mobile networks. TDF has several activities. The main one is TowerCo. We have 15,000 pylons or towers in France. And the second one is an operator, telecom operator or a broadcaster, because we are some TV channels or radio channel. We are broadcasting TV channels or radio channels in France. And we have a telecom activity. And inside this telecom activity, we are focusing today on private mobile networks.
Thank you, Xavier. Thierry?
Hello, everyone. I'm Thierry Berizot. I'm the Director of Telecom IoT Standard and Spectrum at Novamint. Novamint, it's a UK-based company. What we are doing is basically threefold: innovation, business intelligence, and standardization. And in particular, in standardization, we represent the interests of the vertical industry to have a say and a word in the standard, in particular in 3GPP. And on a personal note, I'm also a board member of AWINA, of the NTN Forum, and of the ETSI.
Thank you, Thierry. Yes, to start it, I want really to start with some use cases that I have in mind. For example, an offshore site with a channel to go to the continent. Another use case is two mining on the road between the two mining. What about the connectivity, critical or not, and also other use cases that I have in mind is it could be along a river between two ports, for example. It's really where I think that we have some demand about some use cases with that, on what can you explain you, Sen, regarding this kind of use case? And I think that you have some other example in Belgium regarding this subject, private and public network and coverage.
Yes, exactly, Christian. So Citymesh operates since quite some time, I believe about 7 to 8 years now, a private network covering the offshore wind farms of or before the Belgian, the Netherlands, and the English coast. And we deliver actually mission-critical communication services, especially intended for, let's say, contractors and companies operating and constructing offshore wind farms. The main distinction or the main driver in that particular domain is really the private nature of the coverage. Private nature of the coverage, meaning that quality of service, capacity is at any time guaranteed. So it's a mission critical network. And I believe that's one of the main drivers we have for private networks in general. This was one example, focusing on the offshore market. When we look at our customers onshore, we mainly serve currently like the Brussels airport company, or chemical production plant like BASF in Antwerp, or pharmacy company like Takeda, also serving serve their own connectivity needs by means of a private network. And this is a bit of oh, sorry, I'm a bit confused. Let's say I was expecting a different slide, Christian, but okay, nevertheless, it doesn't matter. Let's start from the beginning on. Since quite some time, we develop and deploy private networks. We deploy them on an isolated basis, meaning that they are fully standalone, creating a set of advantages compared to public network coverage, meaning we deploy dedicated radio infrastructure, we deploy dedicated antenna sites, we have on-site core networks installed, and they are deeply integrated inside the enterprise environment of that particular company. What is the main driver for that? Once again, we can deliver quality of service at any point in time, even during critical situations. That's first of all. That critical connectivity can be leveraged by means of push-to-talk, push-to-video, typical successors IP-based on successors of TETRA and walkie-talkie-based communications, whereas walkie-talkie is currently functioning very properly, but let's say the limit of the feature or the technology has reached its limits in operational usage. So we are setting next steps with innovative push-to-talk technology. That's one of the, let's say, use cases of a typical full private network. On the other hand, use cases which are deployed, let's say, on those private networks are also like fixed wireless access for flexible connectivity on certain spots on site, or even mobile cameras. Thinking out loud of a wide set of, let's say, use cases hosted by private network. When we look to logistics, for instance, and a logistical process is something that occurs in almost every environment, from the airport where luggage is handled towards a chemical production plant where we release batches from production plants towards, let's say, transport on trains, on boats, and so on. They require at some points in time verification by means of scanning, by means of photographs, and so on. Those are all typical cases where we deliver connectivity in operational environments hosted by a private network. Nevertheless, those are all use cases that remain inside the enterprise environment, focusing on that private character. But we see in the market, let's say, needs for leveraging those private networks with new use cases, but use cases in contradiction to you what might expect that not might be the case, but that are more focusing on the outside world. Let me express myself. Private networks, once they are deployed in a fully isolated mode, they do not facilitate by nature connectivity to the outside world, for instance, for conversational speech and for voice calls. Those, or better, that typical use case is now more and more let's say, on the radar of our customers. They want to leverage their existing infrastructure also for voice calls, not only inside the enterprise environment, but also to the outside world. And therefore we have, let's say, established a track towards integration of private networks into a public network. And that integration track comprises 2 gates. First gate, let's call it a soft integration, where we leverage the existing and the deployed radio infrastructure on site by means of shared infrastructure, meaning that we can reuse the antennas in the infrastructure deployed on site also to connect them towards a public network. That approach allows us to have also, let's say, improved mobile public coverage on site. It allows us to have connectivity directly to the outside world. It allows us to have, for instance, voice calls to the outside world, whilst maintaining clearly the priority for the private users. That's one thing. But on the other hand, facilitating also new use cases. That's in regards to leveraging of the existing infrastructure. On the other hand, it must be said that it sets some requirements also to the end user devices, and especially when it comes to the SIM card, which is in the connected devices, that has to be equipped with both a public and private network credentials, simply stated, to have access to the 2 logical networks hosted on the same private infrastructure. It also creates, and that's also something very important, an extra degree of resilience when it comes to, a malfunctioning of the core network on site. Can happen at any time. It doesn't occur often, and that's the good news. But when it happens, it also creates a possibility to have fallback over the public network. And so, soft integration. Eventually, we want to move on towards what we call a fully integrated network, and what we call, not in 3GPP glossary, it's referred to as PNI, NPN, meaning that public network integrated non-public network. It sounds very contradictory, but it isn't. It's actually a next degree of integration, allowing on top a set of new use cases. For instance, consulting private data, a private APN, or a private user group of the private network can be then consulted also outside the enterprise environment. For instance, I can imagine we have like a hospital where a doctor wants to consult the medical file of people staying at the hospital. For privacy reasons, it's maintained, or this data is protected inside the particular environment of the medical institute for privacy reasons. By means of a fully integrated private network, we can also create, let's say, a virtual private network which is exceeding the boundaries of the medical environment whilst maintaining the private nature of the data. And that's one of the use cases we're thinking of, so off-site access. It, however, creates also, and that's something very important, a seamless mobility of private users outside and inside the environment of a private network. For instance, once again, I have a contractor working at Brussels Airport. They make use of the private network, but for some services they need to leave the campus outside the coverage area of the private network. They fall back on a seamless way on the public network, allowing once again extra leverage of the infrastructure and the private network. It sets for sure also some boundaries or some, let's say, requirements to the end user devices, and in particular the SIM card. And that's one of the innovative tracks we are working on, being CityMesh, meaning that we will be, or we are currently creating a unified SIM card, allowing both to be registered on public and private network on a granular basis. So meaning that each user has its profile and has some defined constraints. One of those constraints can be only access to the private network once on site, and outside the campus you're not anymore allowed to access private data, and vice versa. However, you are at any time allowed to have voice calls to the outside world, inside the enterprise network, inside the private network, but also on the public network, creating a sort of, let's say, stretched public and private network.
Okay, thanks for the transition. Interesting. And thanks. I just heard the airport of Brussels. Sorry, I'm born in Air France. I know really well this subject, but it's the same with the ports also. One of the interesting interconnection is what you made, but for the transition, it's really interesting to give the floor to Transatel, because I know that we had some difficulties to connect, for example, some aircraft. If we connect one aircraft in the base of Air France in Roissy, no problem. It's a private network. It's the best connectivity. It's perfect. But if the aircraft is in New York, there isn't any private network. There isn't a private Air France network. It's really expensive. And we saw another solution, interesting solution regarding the SIM card. And it's an occasion to give the floor to Florian regarding this other kind of solution, I think, to interconnect again private and public networks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. And I think many of the elements that were described also help us to jump here, because indeed many different typology of private network exist, and for each of them you may have the needs of a different logic of interconnections. I liked the first services that you highlight about mission critical needs. I explained just earlier that within Transatel we address, before private networks, we address lots of different industries, including indeed airports, airline, aero industry in general, also automotive. And so for both of them, I like this approach to consider that when you are a pilot on the airports, you have a moment where obviously you will travel and you will need to benefit from public networks everywhere in the world. One of the main needs that you will have is, if you already invested inside your private network and you consider that you wanted to have a standalone private network, something completely isolated, you may face more issues to travel and benefit from public networks. When you are a factory that builds millions of cars every year, you're happy inside your factory to have access to a private network for your cars, for your employee, but the employees, they travel outside of the networks. The car also one day will be sold and will stop to use the private networks locally to receive software updates and so on. And once they travel outside to be distributed and use after the public services for all the logistics of telematics, or Wi-Fi on board and so on, you're happy to benefit from public network. So all this type of needs, we just simplify them by saying there is this needs of geographical continuity. So Transatel, we address that, the simple access to public network through multiple operators. When you're in France using a Transatel SIMs, what you have access to is all French operators. When you go in most of the different countries in the world, you have access to multiple public operators. And so we started to think how to allow a more resiliency approach, to say you can benefit to the private networks, priority, and also to all public operators. Additionally to that, you're happy also, you mentioned that, to have also solutions of backup, because the private networks may have an issue locally, may have some maintenance, no service can be 100% always all the time activated. And that's some examples that we are facing in some factories or in some airports that cannot stop their activity. In some factories, when you block the activity for 1 hour, you are losing millions. It's not, so it's, let's say, a small investment to consider that having a backup, relying on public operators, for example, for instance, may be a solution. So we also, I will add just 2 other needs that I didn't highlight it here, is we want to have all these solutions of continuity, and you want to do it securely. You want to have some solutions of allowing you to have your private networks completely independent from the public side. It's what we hear from all the different actors that we already are working with. And you want to do it in a very cost-based, effective manners, obviously, because the more you add some actors inside the panel of suppliers that can answer your needs, the more costly it will be. And so at Transatel, we try to take all these, let's say, these needs, and to build some things that could answer this requirement. So how did we do that? It's focusing, let's say, on one of the points that you highlighted before. Is we said, okay, there are 2 generic approach. One is to say, and that was the main approach historically is to say let's interconnect our private networks to the public networks to allow a continuity between both networks in order to, with different manners, allow a continuity of communications, allow your device to connect to a network or another. But on Transatel side, we consider that there was a separate approach, is to say, and I will say it very exaggerating the things, is to say, okay, you have a private network, let's keep your private networks, which means you have your core networks, your radio frequencies, your SIM card. Perfect. On public side, if you want to go outside, if your employee walk outside the networks, at the moment it loses the private networks radio, the factory access, it can just take off its SIM and put a new SIM card, Transatel One, for example, and benefit to all public network access. It's working very well. Both networks are independent, and that's the best things to do. However, what we hear from our clients when we say that is, it's not perfect. Every day, I don't want my employee to take off a SIM, put a new one. When it's inside the cars, millions of cars going outside, it's also doable, but the logistic of it, so it's not perfect. So from the architecture point of view, it's what they are looking for, from what they tell us most of the time. But from the logistic, it's not working. That's why after we said, okay, let's, indeed, as you highlighted, let's embed inside one SIM two set of profiles, because you know that a SIM card, when it needs to connect to a network, it globally provides some login password to connect to the network, and network check if it's possible for this SIM to connect and say yes or no. So we had one private SIM that can connect to private networks. We take these profiles, we put it in the SIM. We had one public SIM that connect to our networks. We put these two SIMs in one, and after we will do a little bit of magic, because that is not enough. You don't want your SIM that can host multiple profiles to not know at which time it needs to use the profile A or B, because I said earlier that most of the clients, the prospect, the people with the private networks, they are looking to do that with a cost-effective manners, which means they don't want to have a phone or a device that needs at the same time to have two radios and the capability to connect to the profile A or B. So what we did is, inside the SIM cards, we worked a little bit to deep dive in it, and additionally to the two set of credentials, which can be seen as two separate files that allow you access to network A or B, we build what we call here the IMSI orchestrator, but just what's called inside the SIM industry an applet. So it's a little piece of software embedded at the SIM level. So it's easier to embed that at the SIM level. Because it can rely on standard informations which are shared between the radio, the modem, and the SIM without having the needs to add anything. So at the moment you take the Transatel solution, you put your SIM in your device, you don't need to do some private network integration, you don't need to do some device integration, you just need to count on the fact that there will be some mobility scenario which are standardized that will allow your device to always look for the presence of the private networks. And once you are on the private network, this orchestrator will decide to say, okay, let's use our private credential to connect to it. And when I go outside of it, I'm traveling, I am the pilot that goes in another country. Then at the moment it will arrive in the other country, this same applet that is inside the device will after allow you to present your public credential and make you benefit to the connectivity of all the different operators of Transatel. So to say it's not a complete different approach, because you highlighted that indeed it's part of the things that exist on the market. What we highlighted here is almost all of our clients for the moment are deploying standalone private networks, and they have a very strong focus on having something that can be really cost-oriented. So that's why we focused on a SIM-based solution which doesn't need to have other layers of integration at any other point, because it's all based on some standard elements. Plus resiliency, which is another word that I heard that was very important, because we have some things that can be resilient from private network, public networks, and we're happy to say that we have multiple public networks everywhere. And one day, but I heard that during the introduction, there will be also satellite. Once 3GPP will have also standardized and helped to deploy that in all the satellite interconnectivity with the standard mobile operators to have the last miles, let's say, of resiliency. That's all for these specific solutions that we deploy also with important airports.
Thank you, Florian. I see another use cases. Thank you for these subjects. A multi-site, multiple sites. An example, it could be a big factory in the center of Europe. Why not? Why not in the Netherlands? Why not? On some other partners, but small or not small, but they need a critical connectivity again, and they don't want to pay and to buy different small networks with core, with all of the activity. I think that with Xavier, you have something to present regarding this demand. It's another demand in parallel of the private and public. It's also the multiple sites. What can you propose regarding this subject and these needs?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I think that I lost my slides.
Yes, thank you to present.
Somebody can help, I don't know.
It's coming.
Just to be sure to cover all the questions, 100% of your question. I did 122 slides, so I think we have some time together to... No. I will share with you 3 different configurations. Yeah, it's better like this. I will share with you 3 different configurations we can have inside TDF for our customers. And you will see that both of them are more suitable for multiple site customers. So this is the TDF presentation. The first configuration is well known. This is the full on-premise. You can see that everything is on the customer site, main core plus backup core. Most of the time, the customer has some facilities on site, like technical rooms, local IT teams, or so they can do this kind of installation. And they are looking for strong SLAs, and they have money to do that. They can put money on the table for these strong SLAs. Mainly this customer, yes. I think this is our historical configuration because it was mainly the only one available 2 years ago when we began the activity. And most of our customers are large accounts and they have critical sites. On these critical sites, they are looking for strong SLAs. In this site, you can find some power plants, large factories, refinery, railway, seaport or airports. We have some examples in Tahiti for an airport, and we have some customer on ports with this configuration too. Use cases. The first use cases for this customer are mainly critical communications. This is the after Tetra solution. And you can include too worker safety, security or cyber security concerns, video protection. As we can see, data use cases are often coming on a second step. But the first request of the customer is critical communication. The second configuration we can propose is the first step to optimize budget for a multiple sites customer. You can see that you have on the customer site the main core, and the backup is on the data center. It could be the central data center of the customer, or it could be the TDF data center. So the backup is a shared backup. And in case of TDF, this is a shared multi-tenant backup. So it's a way to save a little bit money, but SLAs are still strong. The customer can accept a small degradation of performances in case of running in the backup, latency, for example. And the budget is more affordable for these customers. For TDF, we did the first deployment in Q1 2024 with this configuration. The customer is a well-known customer in utilities. It was for power plant, gas power plants. And the customer put the backup in his central data center, and each site has a backup on a premise. Target for these are still large accounts and medium-sized companies, always for critical sites. So you can find power plants, factories, large warehouses for logistic activities. And the first use case, first use cases are for still for critical communications, worker safety. Some customers come to us because they have a digitalization program, especially for operational processes. Some customers want to install some AMR or AGV, so it's quite complicated with Wi-Fi. And we still have some scanning operations, or sometimes we have request to complete an existing Wi-Fi with an outdoor coverage with a private network. And some customers are coming from industry and they are looking for industry 4.0 target. We can see that sometimes customers ask us to replace DECT infrastructure in terms of the idea is to optimize the ROI. And the latest configuration is quite optimized for, this is not the right, yes, fine. The latest configuration is more optimized again. This time you can see that everything is on the TDF premises, the main core on the backup core. Everything is shared, and this is some multi-tenant cores. Of course, prices are more competitive. SLAs are still high. You have very good performances on site. And these SLAs are linked to the way that you are connected the data center of TDF and the customer sites. And the budget is lower, and it's a way to have new customer or new kind of customer for private mobile network. Some small ones or some customer with a lot of sites in France, for example. We did the first proposal with this kind of configuration in Q3 2024, so a month ago. And we are still working on some features, especially for self-provisioning for SIM cards. Customer targets are SME customers, small or medium factories or warehouses. And the use cases are more for process digitalization, complete an existing Wi-Fi with an outdoor coverage. We have some ongoing POC with AMR and AGV. Because of the latency, we have to test this kind of applications. And this is still a request for Industry 4.0.
Okay.
It's
Good.
okay for me, yeah.
Thank you, Xavier. You are on time. Good, perfect, thank you. Another use case again, sorry, but a lot of use cases with each of your solution. I see again it's airport, but it's also for the port on some other kind of industries. An example is it's my dream to be able, if we are able to connect one ship to the port, to the private network ports. For example, in Aropa, in Le Havre, my dream is to be able to, with the ship, to go to Rotterdam, for example, one of another private network deployed, to be able to connect also the ship with this other private network. I think really that we will see the demand coming quickly. It's the same with the airport, on the airline, on the aircraft, because we are able today to connect the aircraft through 5G connectivity. But if we have the ability to connect the 5G connectivity, but nothing with the public networks, it's a pity. If you are able to connect with some other private networks, it's interesting. It's the floor for you, Thierry, about that. I know that you are with Oina at the 3GPP, and please explain us something like that regarding the...
Thank you, Christian. Indeed, a bit. I will come first on a bit of context, although it has been a bit discussed and proposed by the previous speakers. So there are indeed two types of private network. There is what is called a standalone non-public network in 3GPP term, and the PNI NPN. So basically, a private network integrated in a mobile operator network. So the standalone non-public network, so which is a purely private network. The two example, it's French Paris Airport, it's the Rotterdam. The other type of network are other ports like Hamburg, Southampton, Tyne, and so on. So this is important to see. But what we have seen, and in line with your question, we start to have some of these use cases. We see the emergence of and the need of interconnection between different private network sites. And this is why last year, Novamint started working in 3GPP in SA1 with also the support of WINA about interconnect of specifically SNPN, so the first type or the purely private type of network. So we did some work with Intel, Cisco, but also EDF, Bicom, which now is obvious or part is obvious, with Philips between March and last year and this year. What was achieved in this work is that we have been able to require to have requirement for support of mechanism to enable this interconnect between two or more SNPN, to have a service continuity between this private network, and also a new concept of SNPN cellular hotspot. However, the main issue that we are facing is that we are still missing quite a lot in 3GPP, in particular around the network selection between private networks. So there was no work on network selection between these private networks. We were not allowed to work on this. There is some limited work that has been conducted in network selection between SNPN and public network. However, let's say if we look at the 3GPP solution, this is really not operant. And by the way, a solution like the Transatel one is much more efficient than what 3GPP has currently worked on this. Wow. On this aspect. Let's be honest. And there was absolutely no work on network selection and roaming between the two types of private network of SNPN and PNI NPN. Sorry for this acronym that are really hurtful for everyone. The main issue is, and it was mentioned also in the second session today by Wendy from Obvious, is we have limited support or even opposition from traditional telecom players and MNOs. So the traditional telecom vendors want to control the SNPN and the network selection, and basically they have blocked any progress on this topic to go further. And the MNO, they want to privilege the NPI NPN model because, of course, it's integrated in their network, and they don't accept any change in the roaming process. And so the second reason why we are blocked, it's basically also we have not enough support from vertical. So we cannot push big MNO, big traditional vendors, if the verticals are not involved, if they are not coming, if they are not providing support. We have not enough support voice coming from port, airport, though they have expressed that they are interested by this use case. But they are not contributing, they are not active in 3GPP, so it's difficult to get there. And we have even some industry, in particular, let's say Industry 4.0, that in some way are opposed to this work because they do not see, they want their main use case is really located in the premise, in the factories, and they don't want to discuss interconnect and roaming because they fear that it may change their setup and their possibility. So that's where we are. So basically, to answer the question of Christian, so we are calling for verticals on engagement. So we have this SNPN model, which is basically well adapted for large deployment, multi-site, airport, etc. And you have the ability in theory to scale this up in different locations, in different countries, with the same approach, the same solution. You don't want to change all the time your solution because you have a different operator and different vendors that are provided by the operator in a country in a different country that you have your private network. And we believe that PNI and PN is more adapted for small deployment on one side, where you need to have a dedicated interaction with a dedicated operator. In any case, this interaction, this network selection, all this roaming aspect between all models are needed. So verticals, we urge you to be vocal, to describe your use case, to outline your requirement, to focus on your needs and not on the technology, though I talk about technology before, but really your needs is more important. We ask for missing, basically ask also to your provider for missing network selection and roaming capability, and try to work this through non-proprietary and real interoperable solution, and of course then to evaluate, compare and challenge the solution, including the operator's one. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry. It's not finished, huh, it seems. Huh? And I hope that we will be behind you to represent the verticals again. And we need verticals. It's a call for everyone. Huh? We need verticals to represent verticals at the Swiss GPP to explain that there are needs. Thank you, Thierry. It's a time for the Q&A. It seems that there is a question for Sen, it seems. Maybe you can see the question. As for now, how do you manage the seamless switch between private and public networks? Is it software managed, like the gentleman of LIFO explained, or via SIM card switch? Is it seamless? It's a question for you.
Well, Karim, my answer is twofold. When it comes to what we currently do, currently we rely on what I call soft integration, and that's similar to what my colleague of Transatel is here presenting, meaning that we have a SIM card with 2 IMSI profiles and an applet that is able to select, let's say, the most favorable network, the private or the public. So from that point of view, guaranteeing connectivity of service, it's almost seamless. When it comes to PNI and PN integration, that's a different approach, meaning that we have on one hand the private core network on site, which is equipped with the keying of the SIM card, and on the other hand there is a public operator, a public network in general, where that particular SIM card and its keying is also known, meaning that you have, let's say, a registration or access right to both the public and the private network. And the seamless mobility is actually created by means of direct interaction between the base stations, actually between direct interaction between the 2 core networks, the core network on-premise on one hand and the public core network. Between the mobility management entities of those 2 core networks, there is a direct link creating the possibility to migrate the mobility context from the private on-premise network towards the public network. So to come back to your initial question, it is a set of let's say assets and features and applications that come into place to have a full seamless experience.
Thank you, Sen. Thanks, Mark Berman. I see another question regarding the demand. I think the question is for you, Thierry. What we are doing, what happens regarding the Swiss GPP on, yes, what is the status?
No, I think I a bit describe effectively where we are, what's the status and what was the limitation. And the call for engagement is also, this is what are the next steps. So in terms of next step, we have two perspectives. Either we go in 3GPP and we are trying to work more, but we need more vertical support. Other way also, we try to do things, let's say, a bit outside of 3GPP, but still in standard. For example, we could also think about the solution of Transatel, of Citymesh, that are that are using the SIM card and extend this concept to really cover all these use cases, have a proper network selection, proper roaming between all the situation, and to reach your dream of having be able to use the private network outside of your own private network.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Hakim. Hakim Achouri. Interesting question again. It's for you, Florian, on Thierry.
If I can take this one, thank you, Hakim.
You can read the question, maybe.
Yes, so the question is, how do you see the impact of eSIM SGP32 standard and more generally IoT orchestration solution to roaming use case, public-private or private-public? So I can maybe just start, to simplify. In eSIM technology, or you are a standard user like you and me, you take your phone, you scan a QR code, or you enter manually information on it. This is a standard way for all of us to use it, but there are other standards that exist, mainly focusing on how you can, not for human-centrics, but mainly for, let's say, the car industry, for example, or any object that doesn't have the capability to themselves scan anything, so you don't want to do that for millions of devices. So you have, we were in the aero industry, let's say there is a tower of control that allow you to distribute some profile. Yes, and the new standard that is just released, and we are in the very final parts of its deployment. So we see already in the industry coming new solutions that are really effective and working. Is the SGP3132, and in this one you have this capacity of easily deploy some profile. So that's why Hakim is asking. Now that there is this centralized platform to distribute profile public, profile private, will that change things? Our feeling is that this tower of control still needs a trigger to say when you need to distribute a profile public or private. That's why it's very effective, and we are very happy that it will exist at the moment you want to control things. If you already know, and if you embed a lot of smartness inside your service, if you are, for example, saying every time someone enters inside my factory, he scans something at the entrance, and this scan is a plug to my tower of control that will distribute the profile, it will be amazing. And we're very happy and can't wait to also play with that. There are still some very small limitations that exist. We need to modify a little bit all the SMDP Plus in the world that have very small modifications to embed, but that's already tested and working very well. However, if you don't want to have this tower of control that needs to integrate lots of smartness, and if you want to rely on something that is fully automatic, cost basic, then it's better to have a decentralized solution that is a little bit more at the device level. And so the solution we pushed was to have it inside the SIM. But for the 3GPP needs, I think we still have a lot of things to do at the eSIM level. And I hope we will also speak about that, because the needs really rise from the market to have some solutions that are secured. Don't know if you have...
Yeah, I will complete to say, basically the question is, how do we do an automatic onboarding and the proper network selection? So if we combine this, so probably the solution is in between. It's a mix of eSIM, decentralized, but also with some point of reference or centralized point that can say, or some authority that can say, okay, this device has the right to have this particular credential now that is onboarding in my device, and then in my network, and then when it goes out, maybe that doesn't have anymore the credential. So there are some work needed, and we need to combine our forces, but also we need the verticals to express their needs strongly.
Thank you, Thierry. I think it's time. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. I hope it was clear. I have one remark. I think that the monitoring is essential, and it's a transition for the next panel this afternoon. The monitoring of these networks, because I see that private, public, blah blah blah. It could be difficult in the end for the end users. On the other subject is the use cases. It was one of the subjects. Is the other panel in the afternoon. Thank you very much for everyone, and thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.